Hi everyone, welcome to this session, the SHRA Masterclass on resourcing for retrofit. I'm a principal consultant with Turner & Townsend, and primarily my, experience in this sort of sustainability area has been focused on social housing retrofit, and I've done the retrofit coordinator course as well. So this is just our agenda for the session. Obviously, this is really thinking about the kind of skills and resourcing that you will need to deliver your retrofit project. What kind of tasks and activities you need to be thinking about, mapping those roles to different staff members or others, identifying any gaps and then filling those gaps, and at the end we'll just sort of wrap up with a sort of summary. This is a kind of high-level diagram really for all retrofit projects, obviously specifically relating to SHDF in our context, but it's really kind of thinking about the main activities, and this diagram highlights the key areas to focus on when you start delivering your project. These activities should be planned as soon as possible. You'll have to set out how you intend to deliver each activity, and you will have done that in your bid submission. And you'll have submitted a project plan also, which sets out the timeline for each of these activities. Just as a reminder, all the funding for SHDF must be claimed from the Department for Net Zero by 31st of March 2025, and all work must be completed by 30th of September 2025. Project delivery must not overrun. That is the guidance at this stage. All retrofit work must be certified as compliant with PAS 2035. Funding will not be provided otherwise. Risks need to be properly managed at every stage, otherwise the project will not be delivered on time or on budget. And a last note really to bear in mind is around resident engagement. So really maintain high levels of resident engagement at all stages, otherwise you really do risk adversely affecting your delivery times, costs, reputation, and possibly funding too. So worth keeping that in mind at all times. So just thinking about the overall sort of headline, this masterclass really is themed around resourcing for retrofit, and we'll explore how much you can rely on your existing teams to deliver the key requirements. When embarking on a retrofit program, it's important to determine whether the team has the capacity and skills required. Any gaps that you identify, you need to fill those, and well, identify which ones are the priority, and then obviously fill those that are most important as soon as you can. So this masterclass is particularly relevant for small and medium-sized social housing providers, because they usually have considerable constraints on resourcing. So in terms of identifying those gaps, so carrying out your skills audit. So we've kind of broken this down into 5 steps, and this is really about putting together your retrofit team. So first of all, defining your tasks, roles, and the skills required for your project. Mapping the people that you have available for the project to those tasks. Then identifying the gaps between those 2 steps, 1 and 2. And where you do have tasks and roles, but no one in appropriate skills to cover them, how are you going to bridge those gaps that you've identified? There are a few options for that. Once you have the team, then you need to be thinking about how to manage that team for a successful delivery of the project. Some of the things that we have seen organisations outsourcing so far are quite commonly PAS 2035 services is quite a major one. Resident engagement. sometimes organising some of the kind of community-led events to introduce the retrofit project, retrofit concept, ideas to share with residents and resident groups, production marketing materials, and obviously things like stock energy performance software. That's, you know, very frequently something that you would outsource. So many people opt for a managed service, so where much of the operation of the software sits with a provider, or they might work jointly with a provider who you know, who helps you operate their system. But anyway, that's very much the kind of areas that we're seeing people who are outsourcing various skills. So just thinking about your options for bridging gaps, training staff can be a way to cover a new role, recruiting additional people with the right skills, obviously, outsourcing the activity to a specialist provider. If you are thinking about whether you understand specific roles required in the project, so retrofit projects do involve multiple teams which need to obviously be cooperating, and bear in mind there's a complex mix of internal and external stakeholders. The first step in forming the team is identifying the tasks, roles and skills required to deliver the project. Start by making a list of the different tasks that need to be completed. So we've basically got a kind of long list here of the kind of tasks and activities and what kind of area those tasks, you know, who will be responsible, what kind of departments or roles they should be assigned to. So obviously just working down this list, high-level project sponsorship. So that tends to be someone in a board or cabinet leadership team who has this as their kind of main sort of thrust of what they want to see an organisation achieve. Quite often this is coming from a particular individual, but maybe as this agenda as you know, gets more press and is discussed more widely, then more and more people will be coming on board with this at a high level, which will be very helpful. Thinking about making of key decisions, managing and analysing energy data, extremely important. Obviously, having good data, good information on your stock. Just looking at the people responsible for that, the data leads and asset management teams, contractor management. Hugely important there. In terms of the project and reporting back to the department, monitoring and updating changes in information. Need to be identifying obviously your main contact for reporting, generating retrofit update reports and retrofit outcome reports. These can be handled by a few different people, including retrofit coordinator, obviously, internal project leads, data lead as well. Writing the resident engagement plan, very important task. So we've put in there the tenant engagement lead and customer services department. So, you know, by the way, I'm just going to say at the end of this, we are going to share the slides. So if you want to see all these just different tasks and those responsible sort of individuals or teams, you'll be able to get that at the end of the presentation. So obviously procurement routes and writing the specification, that might be something that you're underway with at the moment, if not having completed. Contract reviews, explaining retrofit plans to residents and support throughout the project. So tenant engagement team we've got in there. Now this can be the resident liaison officer, and also your contractor should also have a resident liaison officer as well, explaining as you start delivery of this from the contractor point of view, when, they should be working very closely. Your as a client, your resident liaison officer, and then the contractor's resident liaison officer should be working very closely together to coordinate and be very aware of access to people's homes, letting people be aware of when different stages of works are going to be happening, what kind of impacts that's going to have, just forewarning people. They might want to make different plans depending on, the levels of disruption, et cetera, et cetera. Could be noise, dust, all sorts of just impacts that people might want to, make plans around. So it's hugely important to let people know when work is planned. Managing queries and complaints. Obviously, this is where people do have questions and maybe complaints about what is going on. Might be a lack of information, could be that they're unhappy about what's been going on with a contractor, but they do have a channel or channels to communicate those back to you and the contractor, and that they will be addressed. So it could be online, it could be direct contact with the RLO because the people are on site every week. It could be emails, it could be through some sort of social media chat. But you definitely need to have these channels available for people, so at least they can feel that they do have access when things aren't to their liking. Next one down that's catching my eye is monitoring compliance with PAS 2035. Got to say any of the other ones aren't just as important, but this is very much a new thing for a lot of them. A lot of kind of delivery organizations. So you need to be really on top of this, because actually engaging a retrofit coordinator at the earliest possible stage is really key, I think, to successful delivery. The retrofit coordinator does have this overall role, project managing from beginning to end, from the kind of retrofit assessment of properties, the design of works, the understanding of risks around different measures, and looking at the medium-term retrofit improvement plan, and then going right the way through to installation of works that are compliant in terms of their installation, that the that the installers are correctly compliant with PAS 2030, and then the post-works follow-up with the residents to make sure that the resident is happy with what's gone on, and that the improvements have been realised. Move on to the next slide. So, yeah, just thinking about the maintenance contracts, where you're going to be keeping the certificates and warranties for work, carrying out post-occupancy monitoring and verification. This might well be something that you want to do with, well, there's the post-occupancy and verification side of the SHDF funding, grant funding agreement, which is all about obviously the understanding of the improvements that are being paid for with the grant and the match funding, and realizing those and making sure that the homes are performing as they should, but also you as a client might well, as a landlord, might well be interested to install a small sample of monitoring equipment in those properties as well. So worth thinking about, and if you're going to be going down that route, certainly have that part of the discussions at as early a stage as possible. And I've got in there obviously the people who will be responsible for that. In terms of, you need to be identifying the properties and residents who would be happy for that to go ahead, who the kind of suppliers of the equipment would be, who would be monitoring that data. So we've got data team in there. And then obviously you're thinking about the things like analysis of that data at a later stage. And then supporting residents in the handover stage. So again, tenant engagement team, maintenance department. Obviously, there's kind of support in terms of if you've got new systems in the home that people understand, those could be boiler controls, could be different ventilation systems. But if people have any questions or they're not clear about how these things operate, that they really feel able to ask questions, and that you have a system of following up with those residents just to make sure that not just straight away, but maybe a month later and 6 months after that they're still on top of that, and they're happy with the new systems. So mapping the roles, you'll need to review that list of tasks and roles that we've just been looking at and ask which of your existing team or individuals can deliver them. If you are part of a consortium, then different members of that consortium might have some of the required skills within their teams, and there might be within the consortium the ability to share those. Thinking about the teams and individuals you've identified, do they have the skills, or do they have the capacity? If they have the skills, do they have the capacity to undertake the retrofit project? It shouldn't be underestimated how much time this is going to require. These projects can get very complex once delivery is underway. You have some properties that are just starting, some that are mid-delivery, some that have been delivered, some that have got follow-ups, and there are likely to be challenges at each of those stages. So capacity issue is definitely something you should be really thinking about, how you're resourcing in terms of full-time people you're putting on this, which obviously is relating to the size of your project, but not to be underestimated. And be honest about how much you can cover this, the requirements with your available resources. It's no good, just kind of hoping for the best. You really should be, trying to make sure that the project starts off in the best shape. So again, just asking yourselves, where are the gaps in your capability? Review the gaps you've identified. Be clear about which gaps present the biggest risk to the project. Understand which tasks will need hard to acquire skills, and when those gaps will actually need to be filled. Not every role needs to be covered from day one, but you must have a plan to have the right skills available at the right time. Prioritize, the filling of certain gaps in terms of critical importance of the roles and when they need to be filled. And just thinking about the opportunities of redeploying staff, those might be quite limited, even if they have the right skills. In most organisations, if they're not already available for your project, they're actively working on something else. So you need a strong business case to transfer them. However, if people with the right skills do exist in your organisation, this can be a relatively quick solution in terms of filling gaps. Recruiting additional staff is always possible, but there are two challenges. Recruiting specialist skills can be very time-consuming and costly. And with the increasing focus on retrofit projects, some skills and roles are in short supply. For example, recruiting qualified, experienced retrofit coordinators is proving difficult at the moment. Gaps can be filled by outsourcing tasks to third parties, but please, bear in mind that it can be a costly solution. Unless you have an existing relationship, setting up a contract may take time. It increases the complexity of the management task. You wouldn't gain the skills and experience in-house if you're subcontracting as opposed to training. And you can suffer the same problem of supply and demand as with recruiting. So just a checklist at the end here, just Make a list of all the key tasks in your project, e.g. 2035. Make a detailed list of the required roles. Map the resources you already have available to the task list. Identify any key gaps. Identify which gaps represent the biggest risks to the success of the project. So you're prioritizing your need and at which stage you will need to fill those gaps as well. Decide the route, cost and time required to bridge the gaps, and then take steps to ensure the team work well together. So hopefully that has given you a very, very quick overview of really the importance of careful resourcing. Don't underestimate this. It's, as I said a couple of minutes ago, it's really important to start off in as good a shape as you can be. If you find that people aren't being utilized as much as you thought, that is a better position to be in than you're chasing your tail and things are going away from you, getting away from you, and you're then suddenly scrabbling to try and get new people in once the workload is too much. It's much better to be in a well-resourced position at the start and be able to let people drop off if you don't you're not using them as much as you thought. That's it from me.